Imagine a time when there were goddesses in the world and when there wasn't just one male god. Go back 10, 20, 30,000 years ago to the ancient times. The triple goddess was there. The triple goddess was alive. And people had that spirituality and a kind of an indigenous Stone Age. And then it became paganism and neo-paganism, modern paganism. And people had trouble worshiping goddesses anymore. Where did all the goddesses go? That's the topic of my presentation today. And we're going to take you through a journey. So stay tuned. I'm going to do the Triskele, the triple goddess, 3 goddesses in one. And I believe Christianity appropriated these goddesses. So stay tuned. All right? It's going to be a fun ride. I hope you enjoyed that introduction to what happened to Triskele. This is going to be a personal journey, some personal storytelling, and some work on my theory. Triskele storytelling theory, I call it. Now, what is that? Well, let me tell you the story of my daughter first. Renee Boget. She likes to pronounce it in the French, so I will too. She does shamanic drumming ceremonies and goddesses work in Canada, in Vancouver. And I was really happy to give her some training in shamanic drumming when I was taking classes, and I studied it for, I don't know, half a dozen years. And she wanted to only do it with women. So this is women who were pursuing their goddess. And Renee Boget does the ceremony. Now, she can do that because she was in Brazil and she was a guide for ayahuasca for a few years, and then she moved back to Canada. So here's her website. I'll put it in the description. She specializes in plant spiritual medicine, and she does her ceremonies, and she's got a marketing crew, and her seminars are packed. So I'm proud of my daughter. So Triskele, as I'll pronounce it, is the idea of a triple goddess, and it occurred thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years ago. It was strong. I kind of like that idea of the goddesses. Personally, I grew up in the Catholic religion and then the Lutheran and a trip to evangelical. And it wasn't until my second marriage, I'll show you a little later, I got into Jainism in India, and all these goddesses were part of India. And I was just much happier with the female goddesses, I'll tell you. I'm not trying to persuade you, but, T.J. Conway has a book on the maiden, the mother, and the crone. These are the 3 triple goddesses that I call Triskele. Triskele is this symbol you see in the lower right, a modern version of it, and I use it in my storytelling a lot. You've probably seen it in my work if you've seen my books. I got about 30 books on storytelling and 150 articles. Now I just do YouTubes. The Triskele was also known as the triple spiral, and the Triskelion, an ancient symbol, originated pre-Christian in Europe in that Fertile Crescent, and I'm showing you where that Fertile Crescent is. You can see it tipping out there of where these modern cities are. But yeah, 10,000 to 2200 BC, the new Stone Age. But it happened before that too, as we'll see in a second. The word Triskele comes from the Greek, tri meaning 3 and skelos meaning legs. The triple goddesses, I'm showing you different images of them here. The symbol can be represented, the 3 aspects, the triple goddess in Celtic mythology, and my ancestral roots go back to the Celtic and the Danish, so A little bit of North, a little bit of Celtic. Both of them had these triple goddesses traditions of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. Right. And in the bottom left, you see kind of a coin that they had at the time, or medallion. The maiden, the mother, and the crone are three aspects of the triple goddess. A deity, archetypes of many neo-pagan and spiritual traditions. So there were pagan traditions and neo-pagan, and in modern traditions. I'll show you in a timeline, but let's just talk about what it's about. It's the stages of the female life cycle, right? The maiden represents the bud of spring, the emerging of the full potential. The mother represents the fertile creator of life, lush and abundant and nurturing and resilient. Crone represents the craggy wisdom, hard-earned and mysterious to others. She is the summation of the woman's life. Experienced, wise, old mother, full of wisdom, knowledge, judgment, until death. So the three life phases. I like female goddesses. The triple goddess is often associated with Artemis, the maiden, Selene, the mother, and Hecate, the crone. Here you see them spelled out here. Triple goddess. So paganism, let's start to get into the historical. Now, the origins of paganism can be traced back, right, to small goddess figures created around 30,000 BCE. That's a long time ago. The term pagan was used by Christians early as the 4th century, describing followers of the non-Abrahamic religions. Neo-paganism is more about the 19th century use of the term. And it's a revivalism after Christianity spread and just knocked it all out in Europe, right? And the modern popularity of the term neo-pagan is largely attributed to one Oberon Zell Ravenheart, who co-founded the first neo-pagan church, 1967. And my daughter founded a church for the goddesses as well in Canada. So let's just put it in a timeline here. 8000 BCE, the earliest evidence of pagan practices. 4th century BCE, ancient Greek and Roman paganisms. Puppies growling out there. 8th century Viking paganism, and that's, I got some Viking blood in me. And Slavic paganism, 10th century, revival of paganism, 18th century. And I'll put the source to this figure so you can read it in more detail from the description link. So the timeline I put together here is early polytheistic religions, many gods, goddesses, various cultures in Europe, Asia, Africa, including the Celtic and the North. That's my ancestral roots. Celtic paganism flourishing between 700 BCE and 400 CE, with worship of deities like Lugh and Dagda and Morrigan. I want to go back earlier than that, but okay, then the North paganism developing in Scandinavia with gods like Odin and Thor and Freya. You see these in popular movies. Earlier medieval era, 1st to 10th century, Christianity spreading all throughout Europe. And I'll call it later kind of a grand narrative that spreads and dominates other kinds of spirituality and its storytelling. So that's happening. The modern era, 19th to 20th century, that revival of the Celtic and North paganism, and the Romantic movement resulting now in modern paganism groups like Wicca and heathenry. So what happened to Triskel, that very, very ancient notion of the triple goddesses? Well, when Christianity took off, they replaced the three goddesses with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So now you've got that symbol on the left, Triskel, and it shifts to another symbol with 3. So you got to it makes me wonder if the triple goddesses got appropriated by this Christianity religion that I left a long time ago, by the way. And, I enjoyed it when I was in it. And I guess the Triskel also adorns the flag of Sicily. I'll see if I can find one. So what happened to Triskel storytelling? That's my field, is storytelling. All kinds of storytelling. And the second Triskel that the second phase here is to talk about, I use this Triskel, the triple spiral, to understand storytelling, that I look at 3 kinds of relationships: the grand narratives, big grand narratives taking control and domination, the living story we live, more tied to nature for me, and the anti-narrative processes that are preparatory and constitutive of grand narratives and living stories. So they're little fragments that are gathered together before you even know what your living story is, or your grand narrative that you're being dominated by is, or maybe you're creating one. Jacques Derrida talks about living story phase, and we got a video. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description, or just search for it on YouTube. Living story is an alternative to corporate narratives that cohere and are linear and have a beginning, middle, end. So he looks at a much more process similar. It's kind of in between what I call anti-narrative and living stories. Sort of a lot of ambiguity and fragments that are bubbling up, constant change, and these things are transforming and reforming as they're happening in the moment. So, but let me give you an example of my living story. So, born December 1947, you can see my dad riding the tricycle there. He riding my tricycle, right? He was in the Navy. We had the life on the farm. All of our ancestors going back, tracing back to like 1300 or so, were farmers. I failed kindergarten. We won't talk about that. So that's a dip. My life goes up when we go to Wilderness Lake, Alaska. Beautiful place. I use it when I meditate. I'm always meditating there. I'm down in New Mexico now, but I meditate on that place in Alaska. I was in when I was about 12 years old. So it falls down and fades when we moved to Paris, and come back from Paris. My parents divorced, and I got 2 brothers and a sister, and I had a little time in jail. We won't talk about that, right? And got my first hug from my parents when I was probably about 22. These were rough people. They didn't hug their children, I always hug my children. I was drafted in the Army in '68. For me, that was a high point because I could get out of the poverty I was in. And I got married almost a month later. Had the first child while I was in Vietnam, so I went pretty quickly to Vietnam. Got Agent Orange. We'll talk about that later. And I'm not going to, you have a living story. I have a living story. There's ups and downs, and it's not a line that goes boom, like a linear narrative. Okay, that's my big point. Okay, I graduate first in my class at Rider University. That is pretty cool. And I get my PhD, and I graduate first in my class from that University of Illinois. I have the 3rd child. I had failed my tenure review at UCLA, but I pick up my career at Loyola Marymount. My business failed. I left academia, and that's a low point. And I begin again, and I got a job at Loyola Marymount, became Teacher of the Year like 5-6 years in a row. It was really a honeymoon there for me. And then I had a bankruptcy in a business we started, and that brought us down. Then divorced after 25 years of marriage. Then my line goes up when I met Grace Ann Roselle, and she is into Jainism, and I became into Jainism, turned vegetarian, But then my dad dies in 2002, my mom dies in 2010, my sister dies in 2007, so a lot of deaths right there. But I begin again and climb. I go on a vision quest. I've got 5 wonderful grandchildren. You can see some of them here. But between 2020 and 2024, they find I got stage 4 cancer. But good news, I meditated, I watched my diet, I exercised, I got into some clinical trials, and I meditated with the little Buddha figure you see. Anyway, now that's enough about me. I just want you to know I'm doing really well. So 2024 is up here, not down there. It's up here because it looks like I'm going to live a long time. All the reports have been really good. MD Anderson Cancer Clinic, thank you. You have your own living story. We'll talk about indigenous living stories because they're very ecological. Leroy Little Bear gave a wonderful presentation, and there's some wonderful YouTubes you can find out. Just search for Leroy Little Bear. Again, I'll try to remember, put a link in the description. He talks a lot about R's, so I added a few R's so I'd have 7 R's. You'll see why in a minute. But he talks about respect for nature, the relevance of our life in nature, our responsibility to support and have renewal, to do a rethinking here about our relationship, the reciprocity we have with relationship. He says all my relations, and he doesn't mean people, just people. He means animals and plants and mountains and streams, all the relations. So this is an indigenous approach to living story. He talks about Blackfoot metaphysics, which I like very much, and I love that video, so check out the link. I do some things, what I call quantum storytelling, because I'm interested in the world and nature and humans' relationship to nature and all the other species. So, and the relation to quantum is, as Leroy Little Bear explains it, waves, those quantum waves, everything is vibratory. The rocks, the mountains, the streams, the air, light, everything is vibratory. But for indigenous people, some, not all, some, those waves are spiritual. Now my name is known because of anti-narrative. ANTE stands for antecedent, and I got 7 B's. That's why I created 7 R's. Added a couple here. I hope you don't mind, Leroy. Anyway, so we start with going beneath the grand narrative, like going beneath the Christianity, Judaism, whatever it is that believes in one God, and go to the before. Like I'm going way back in history, 30,000 years, to the 3 goddesses. The bets on the future. Now my bets change on the future if I'm fixed on one kind of spirituality or another, and my being in the world changes because my meaning of what's space-time mattering, as Karen Barad talks about, the quantum, really intelligent quantum writer, quantum physics writer, who writes about vibrant mattering in the world, space-time mattering, that they're inseparable. We won't go far into that. I got a lot of videos on it. But we're always in a stage of becoming. So these 7 B's are interactive. I got them in a circle, but it's just a nice way to display it. Doesn't mean they're sequential. And you can take them out of order. You can go in the between what your identities are in the world. And you got a beyond, the spiritual ecology, which I mentioned before with Leroy Little Bear, Gregory Cajete, Eduardo Barrera, Don Pepillon, people that come to our annual conference, start the conference, keynoted, and just have been carrying along the white folks so we can understand indigenous ways of knowing. But these anti-narrative processes are fragmented, and they kind of undergird and support and constitute what I call grand narratives and living stories. Now, grand narratives we're going to get into now. There's a performativity. You perform in Catholics, you kneel. Lutherans don't kneel, but they got their own rigid processes. Different spiritualities, they have a way of performing it, and you're expected to perform that way. Christianity, my experience of it tend to marginalize other kinds of spiritualities, Eastern spiritualities, for example, indigenous spiritualities. Who gets a voice? Well, in a male-dominated religion, males get a voice. I was in this church once, evangelical, and I found out that was the old Scottish church, and they didn't allow women to be in any kind of leadership except serving food. I was like, I'm getting the heck out of this one, you know? And the gays, you know, you're being looked at, how much money to put in a collection plate. There's a universalisms, you know, God's up here, out of the world, not here as part of nature. There's essentialism, the traits that you're supposed to have as a Christian or a Jain, you know, or you believe in the three goddesses. And you have the totalisms, kind of a totalizing understanding of the world, and that in early Christianity, and thank goodness they're changing, but you had this idea that you had dominion over the world, and all of everything was a resource, like a dead resource, or things you could make dead and use them as resources. Anyway, so this is mind-blowing, but consider it a big map of my approach here. Triskel, look at the 7 R's of the living story. I want to give you something to remember, the 7 B's of anti-narrative, and these grand narrative approaches that I wrote about in the Disneyland article, my most famous article. I'll put a link in, or you can find it. I did a video, last couple of videos on it. So Jacques Derrida says these grand narratives, and I'm using Christianity and these kind of one God approaches, the violent instrument of torture, which imprisons life and other voices. I mean, I spent a lot of time kneeling in the Catholic Church, and they used to say the nuns, that when I was in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, they had the number of knots in those ropes was the number of children that they had, well, taken off the earth. That was a rumor, wasn't true, but you know, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, you tend to believe these rumors. So the critics of grand narrative include Jacques Derrida, Hannah Arendt, Jean-François Lyotard, and myself, David Boji, in my 2001 book in particular. So the linear arc of grand narratives, very popular in the movies, like the 5 C's of storytelling. And again, there's a source here. Characters, and they have a conflict, but it's in a context that they're exploring on their adventure. There's a climactic scene, and then there's a conclusion. So it's nicely tied up. As I showed you in my graph, my living story is not like that. It's not like that at all. Hannah Arendt pointed out that it was ideology that totalitarian regimes used to prevail over the masses so that they'd accept the grand narrative, you know, the fascists and the Nazis, etc. And she wrote about the Holocaust, and she wrote about totalitarianism, and she was a wonderful, wonderful inspiration. So you accept these grand narratives at face value because they have this simplistic linear structure. And Hannah Arendt, in The Origins of Totalitarianism, I believe this is where the quote's from, ideological thinking becomes emancipated from the reality that we perceive with our 5 senses. So our sense-making. And it insists on a truer reality concealed, what I call beneath, she calls it behind, all perceptions, things dominating them, in this place of concealment requiring a 6th sense. And that's what I approach my anti-narrative work, is kind of this 6th sense. My wife, Grazianne Roselle, loves horses. She calls it horse sense, which is very cool. Nothing we use or hear or touch can be expressed in words that equal what is given by the senses. And I think even beyond that, there's a precognitive, pre-sensory anti-narrative aspect. So Jean-François Lyotard is a big critic of the grand narrative in his book, Postmodern Condition. And I've gone through some of those ideas already, like universalisms and totalisms and essentialisms. So read the book or look at my Disney article and apply it to Walt Disney and Disneyland. as a grand narrative. So the 5 C's of linear grand narratives: the character, who's the main character, the context of the backstory, the conflict problem of the main character faces, the climax, that moment, the moment makes the whole story unique, and the closure. But it's a very linear thing, even though I got it set up in a circle here, just easier to display it. And Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, here's one rendition of it. You know, we have the known world and the unknown world beneath that. And we go separation with the call. We refuse the call because we want to appear macho. And then we get some aid from the supernatural. We cross the threshold and go from separation to initiation. We go through the road of trials. They have the ordeal, maybe the death of the mentor, a battle with a brother, a temptation of some sort, and we make our road back. We refuse to return, but we want to bring the boon back and ultimately return. Right? That's the adventure. But again, it's in a circle, but it's still kind of linear. Here you can see another circle, and it's divided into Act 1, the beginning, Act 2, the initiation, the middle, and Act 3, the ending, the return. So we call these grand narratives in my work. Now, one way around such a grand narrative, Triskel, as I like to say, Triskel, the 3 goddesses, like to think of the 3 goddesses. Tamara de Lampaquita, I just finished that documentary on Tamara de Lampaquita, the deco artist who was an entrepreneur, 1920s and 1930s especially. Her work just took off, and she took on the male establishment, the glass ceiling grand narrative. Well, a play was named after Tamara de Lampaquita, and the play is called Tamara. I also named a journal that I founded after Tamara. And it's still running. You can send your art essays there and critiques of the modernist art or whatever you want to do. Go through review. But anyway, so you're in different rooms. You can't be in all the rooms at once. You follow the story. It's one of those things that's very much like modern organizations, where you can't be in all the rooms at once, and the boss is in one room, the board of directors is in another room, the technicians are in a room, the customers are coming in for support, and the suppliers are in another area. So you can't be everywhere at once, so the storytelling is going on in multiple places and multiple rooms. And you're not remaining stationary, you're following characters from room to room. But this is Mussolini's mansion. You get a passport that says 1927. John Krzyzak is very exciting writer of the play Tamara, and he wants you to experience fascism in the era of Mussolini and what that's like. Now, a lot of Art Deco, and Tamara de Lampaquita, the Art Deco painter, is coming there to entertain and woo, whatever needs to be done to keep this military hero that's being held in handcuffs of decadence. Not real handcuffs, but, you know, all the wine, women, and song he can ever imagine, to keep him from running against Mussolini, so Mussolini can have control. So Tamara is very exciting. It's Los Angeles' longest running play, and Gabriele D'Annunzio is the poet, the patriot, the military hero, but he's also a womanizer, and he never gets out of the decadence handcuffs and takes on Mussolini. Now, next phase, I'm going to talk to you about conversational storytelling interviews. I use a particular methodology of ground narrative and living story and anti-narrative. And we did a nice presentation to a Russia audience. It was kind of nice because Tamara Lampaquita left Russia when she was about 15 years old, when the Russian Revolution hit. But I'll try to remember to put that YouTube link there for you. Forrest Triskel I want to look at, because we looked at a couple already, but this one is Charles Saunders Peirce. I've spent a lot of time, particularly in New Zealand, with all the volumes of everything he ever wrote. And I like this model, the first triad. He has a lot of triads, as you're going to see. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them because I prefer talking about the Triskelion goddesses, but whatever. Inductive, like you gather cases up. Abductive, you got ideas, you got guesses, you got estimates. They're not fully formed hypotheses, but you got intuitions. And deductive, you got theories. So you want to check out your theories, you go collect some inductive cases. And you want to check out your abductive stuff, you go check out the cases and you check out the existing theories. So I call it the Peirce Triad, Charles Saunders Peirce. Now, there's some things I did with it when I was in New Zealand. I got introduced to this word ahau. It's A-H-A-U. It means you bring the gift of your storytelling. And that choreopraxis of conversational sharing back and forth depicted by the internal double spiral there. And again, it's kind of like the Triskelion, right? And we'll see more Triskelions coming up. They just have the 3 arms. Now, Triskelion here, ahau, means as a researcher, I bring my story to you. Like I just shared my story, my ups and downs of my whole life with you, okay? And I would do that before I ask you to share your story with me. I give you a gift of my story, you give me a gift of your story. That's the Maori way in New Zealand. Now, what we do, and ahau, you see the 2 and the 1. So say I'm doing a research project, I interview 2 people that agree with my approach and 1 that doesn't. Then the next round, I group 3 people, have a little sit down, talk about my storytelling method or whatever it is, the triple goddesses, and we bring in a 1 + 1, like 2 people come in, a 1 and a 1, and then they're against the theory. So next one, there's 4 people I talk to, and they kind of like support my theory, but I go find 1 that doesn't, and the last one, 3 that support it, and a 1 is there, and another one walks in, so 5 altogether. 3 support, 2 are against, but I'm learning by talking through the differences with people. I'm listening to the differences. I'm not trying to overwhelm them with my approach, and this deepens my understanding, and we call this the self-correcting spiral. It's based on Charles Saunders Peirce, a presentation I did in New Zealand, and then integrating with kind of an indigenous way of research. I put together a little table. You've heard about the black swan. Everybody used to think the swans were all white in the 18th, 19th century, but then somebody discovered a black swan, and then speckled swans, and then swans of different colors of speckles. And so at the time, the deductive theory was all swans are white, but induction said this bird is a swan, the cases you gather, and the abduction, all swans were white. But this bird is a swan, the case, therefore this bird is a white swan. And they sort of went through that thinking, and they just kept doing it with their conclusion, their premise, and their cases. But then somebody says, hey, that's a black swan. Your whole theory is wrong here, because the black swans exist and speckled swans exist. Now, Søren Breyer from Denmark, Charles Saunders Peirce, I've talked to you about his semiotics a bit. What Søren Breyer does, in our fascinating discussions with him in Denmark, is cyber semiotics. So he combines Charles Saunders Peirce work with Niklas Luhmann, the famous systems theory guy. And there's a link to the website with my class notes there for presentations I gave year after year in Philadelphia, in Europe, in New Mexico State University, and everywhere I went, people would ask me about it. Well, I really like Søren Breyer's model, and I've written about it. This is his model. So you have the life, the living system, right? That organic revolution, that embodiment, what we call living story, right? And then you've got the inner consciousness, your inner mental ego and the self-talk you have with yourself and your reflections on life. Then you have sense making, right? And the history of culture, the histories of the grand narratives, for example, in many different languages. But then you got a matter energy, kind of the quantum wave effect, the physical nature that with the discovery of quantum physics now has its own language and a different consciousness. And these four parts of the star, Thornbrier star, are interactive. And I think it's wonderful writing that he does, and I recommend his work. And so what I've done here with Peirce's induction, abduction, deduction approach is a connected induction to a living story, anti-narratives to abduction, because they're kind of intuitive guesses, and you don't even have a whole theory there, and ground narratives you're deducing from a big theory, whatever that big theory is, and you're applying it to your living story cases, or you're shutting down any kind of anti-narrative abductions because you got such a strong theory that you can't open your mind to anything. So here's another Triskel, Charles Saunders Peirce, that he talks about the firstness, the secondness, and the thirdness, and I've tied the anti-narratives to it, right, with the thirdness, the secondness, the grand narrative, and the firstness, the living story. So he had all kinds of triads, and as I studied him, read everything, every word he wrote, tried to understand how I could apply triad to Triskel's storytelling. This is one of my early drawings in 2017, and the firstness, the secondness, the thirdness. And I tie it to Karen Barad's work on agential cuts. Meeting the Universe Halfway, 2007 is her book, and after she did it, and doctoral students made me aware of her book. I started teaching in every doctoral seminar I had. Her notion that the material and the discursive go together and they're not really separated material, because we tell stories with the material world and we're in that material world. I'm wearing material now, it's part of my storytelling, but there's an agential cut that Grand Narratives makes. It's this linear monologic, one voice, one hero, and there's a counter narrative agential cut, and there's an anti-narrative agential cut. One of the counter narratives for me is the living story, and then the anti-narrative, the thirdness, all the B's that I showed you before. So a fourth one, and again, I wanted this to be about Triskel and the goddesses, so I'm going into this highly logical presentation, but the firstness is kind of the retrospective, and the secondness is the now mattering, is another way to look at it, and the thirdness is kind of future-oriented. And Peirce also does the icon, the index, the symbol, if you've seen that one. And I'm just going to flip through them here. The sign, the object, and the interpretant, and I can tie that to my work on anti-narrative, etc. And I love his notion of kind of the spiral of chance, the spiral of mechanistic necessity of habits, the spiral of creative love, positive sympathy. And that's really cool. And he doesn't use the word spiral, that's me. But he has this evolutionary love, and then we have these mechanistic, what I call grand narratives. And then you have the spirals of chance, the anti-narrative bets on the future. And this is something I played with my doctoral students in 2017. Anyway, so I really want to get you back to this notion of the goddesses, and really appreciate my daughter's work and her work with the goddesses of the Eastern and the European and just around the world. Wherever there's goddesses, she's doing ceremonies, studying their history, trying to connect with them, and that's what's happened to Triskel is there's kind of this revival of the triple goddess work. I guess you could call her a modern neo-pagan, and I'm very proud of her revival of paganism here in 2024. And the triple goddess Artemis and Selene and Hecate. But there are many other goddesses in many parts of the world that were there 30,000 years ago, and then the male-dominated approaches took over with their grand narratives, and then there was witch hunts, and it was terrible. And the indigenous, same thing. They took over the notion of two-spirit and sent the indigenous people in the United States to religious schools and cut their hair and made them speak English, and took away their culture. So that's the story that I'm telling today, is the triple goddess. The symbol can represent these three aspects: the maiden, the mother, and the crone. The maiden, young; mother, pregnant, has children, takes care of children. The crone has wisdom. And if we treated the crones with wisdom, that would be fantastic, right? Hecate, Hecate. And this happened in the Fertile Crescent. And so I hope you like this idea of the triple goddess, and I've been trying to apply my work on living story and grand narratives and haunting narratives to this notion of the triple goddess. Appreciate you, Grace, my daughter, Grace Ann, and I appreciate you. My daughter, Renee Danielle, and she's in Canada, and she says Boger. And so I will honor her by saying Boger, and lots of luck in your Samhain shamanic drumming ceremonies with the women who are pursuing the goddesses. Samhain is the first day of November, so that's coming up, and she's going to have a ritual celebrating the ancient Celts as a festival marking the beginning of the winter. And I can see her drumming now, and I'm going to drum along with her. So give us a subscribe, a like, put a comment in. And if you don't have a drum, a rattle will do, or just meditate, right? Go find the triple goddesses. Go find the Triskel in your own life, if you want to. I mean, you do what you want to do. I'm just having fun here. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and that you will give us a comment, share it with others, and have a wonderful time, okay? Bye.